Okay, you were telling me about the bottom. What was this bottom like when it came out of the factory?
Okay. Yeah, we were actually talking about 5200 bottom, and I didn't quite get finished with that. 5200 bottom, you'll have a waterproof layer of plywood, and then of course you'll have a waterproof layer upstream 5200 that's between the plywood and the planks. And then the planks themselves end up being a waterproof layer, which they were not a waterproof layer, and they're intended to be a waterproof layer from the factory. And that gets us to the original construction of the boat. When this boat was upside down in the factory, they put the plywood on, and on some boats they put diagonal planking in. And then they put canvas over that layer. And the canvas was your waterproof layer. And this plywood, or diagonal planking, whichever the boat had, it was purely to keep this canvas from becoming balloons between the frames. All right, and then the outside layer of planks, longitudinal planks, which are ½ inch thick, they were to protect the canvas from roots and rocks and stumps and all the stuff in the lake that would rip the waterproof layer apart. So that's how it was built. The canvas, the planks were bed. A layer of bedding compound was put down before the planks were put down, and it's like linseed oil and and lots of solids, and it supposedly never cures. But eventually the oils would leach out, and eventually this stuff does harden. So and then people would caulk the bottoms. They would decide to caulk the bottoms of their boats, and they'd rip out the old caulk with a razor knife. So many times the canvas layers are ripped to shreds anyway. 5200 bottom is, as we described, a layer of plywood, layer of rubber, 5200 rubber, and then a layer, and then your longitudinal planks. Now, some of the longitudinal planks, if they rot in them, they'll need to be duplicated with a new plank. Other planks can be put back on. I'm running a boat that we put 5200 bottom on it 18 years ago, and we reused the planks. We even reused the plywood in that boat.
Now, you said this plywood is still in pretty good shape toward the outside edges, toward the keel, or toward the chimes.
Yeah, and actually this side, all the way to the keel, up into maybe right this area right here. And it looks a little soft right here, and I took my pick inside when we downloaded that. But anyway, so it doesn't look bad on this side. You got a bad spot under your feet over there, and while those frames are out, that bad spot could actually be pulled up and replaced, and just in the bad area. So you could do piecemeal replacements, but what happens is, at some point, and we're nearing that point, all of the little repairs in the many different spots becomes more work than just taking the bottom off and getting it over with and putting the new bottom on.
Okay.
And you're right now you could go either way, and I would suggest a new bottom, just because working in several separate areas, and if you get all done and then you find another area that's gone undetected, your heart will sink. So, and that's happened to me before. Okay. Your heart will sink, and you'll have more work to do, and then at that point you'll realize it would have been better just to put a new bottom on. So, and these frames right here that were in question, those will be much easier to do with the bottom off, and you can do them in one piece, and you do them from the outside of the boat, and they're easy to fare in. So even the time that you save on those two frames by having the bottom off is, probably to your advantage.
Okay, so you think that these 2 frames or 3 frames here I'd need to replace, but other than that, the frames look okay.
Not bad.
Okay,
yeah.
What about these intermediate little stringers here?
They're intermediate ribs.
Okay,
and
that's
they're
what
made
they're
out of
called.
white oak, and they're laid flat. Up in front, there might be some steam bending involved, but back here, they will bend and conform to the bottom of the boat quite nicely. The ones that are badly torn up, pull them out, and you can split them with a chisel. Pop the fastener through by tapping the fastener lightly. It'll go back through the bottom,
okay.
and then your screw holes are automatically opened up for you and ready to go.
And now, are those the screws? Those things are screwed in from underneath.
From underneath. Matter of fact, you can see it right here.
But do those screws go through the plywood or through the planking?
Both.
Both.
They go through the plank too. And what they're doing, these are really just clamps. this was really just to clamp all the layers, the plywood, the canvas, and the longitudinal planks, to clamp them together. You'll also notice these little screws with the flat heads on them. You won't need them again if you do a 5200 bottom. And they are also to try to hold the two layers together as tightly as possible to prevent water. Water will find a path. It'll find a path from the plank seams to eventually to a seam in the plywood that you see down here. And so if you can make those two layers expand and be held together, then you close that path up.
Okay. Shall we go down and take a look at the bottom quick before we quit here?
Yeah, string it right under your foot, and then and this guy would really be no problem. The scarf joints. Oh, and by the way, when doing the keel, if you can avoid doing the keel back here and having to drill the keel, that would be great.
Okay, so even if I take the bottom off, I should try to leave that back end of the keel, and that looks pretty solid.
Yeah, just for simplification, because
because that's where the rudder post is at,
and that's where you've got to drill this hole. And these are no fun to drill, but it is possible. You know, we'll do a video on that if we have to. But you can, if you got a whole new bottom on, a whole new keel, you set your engine. And I've got some tools with laser bore siders in them that look like a piece of shafting, and I can tell where my holes need to go. So it can be done. It's just that if you can avoid doing that, that's an extra.
And it looks like I can, because it looks like we're solid up to maybe 6 inches, 8 inches in front of that flange, of that stuffing box.
Yeah, so you could probably
just put our joint about right here. So
yeah, about right here. Yeah.
Okay.
And then right here, scarf joint on your stringer.
Now, when you say scarf, do you mean like a 7-to-1 angle?
Yeah, or 8-to-1 angle, and you could even angle it this way. Instead of having to scarf it vertically, you could scarf it this way, and then you could through bolt it with carriage bolts and put your nuts on this side. So you don't want to interfere with your steering rod.
Now, do you want to put those scarves somewhere other than a frame?
Somewhere other than a frame. You can cross a frame. If you're doing a scarf, a lot of times, if I was doing a scarf and I was doing my scarf in this plane instead of this plane, if I was doing it in this plane, then I would actually